Recording. Hello, everybody at home. Thank you so much for tuning into today's video. My name is Bryce Tubbs. With me today is Jo Jackson. She is a high performance coach who helps people master their potential and increase their capabilities. Is there anything else you'd like me to add, Jo, to be able to, introduce you better?
Hey Bryce, thanks for having me today. You know what? So much more that I'd like you to add, but I'm pretty sure that the people viewing this can't hear me talk for hours. In a nutshell, that pretty much describes what I do. But what I really want to point out is that what I do is not just available to the few, it's available to the many, and anyone can master their potential.
Excellent. That's going to be a very great thing that we talk about today because I don't know if a lot of people, well, 90% of people don't even come close, but I wonder if you have like some tips or tricks on how people can tell how close they are coming to their full potential right now. So that'd be kind of interesting. So can you take us back a little bit? What was life like before you got into coaching?
Before I decided to step into coaching officially, I always had it in my blood. I was that kid at school that people would come to for advice. I was that one that people would ask for an opinion. And I was always able to give a neutral opinion, which really wasn't, you should do this. It was, well, have you considered doing this? Or have you thought about the impact of that? So for me to step into coaching, it was just a natural transition for something that I'd been doing for quite some time.
Okay. So what was the catalyst? Were you working a job before you get into it? Like the coaching business that you have now? What were you doing
Hmm.
before that? Like, what was life like before that?
Yeah, I've got some very interesting experience actually. I've been in learning and capability for quite some time, and initially I started off in life insurance of all places. So I've done some time in a very intense environment in life insurance claims where I've worked with clients strategically to be able to help them live what we call their best life. So a
Mm,
lot of people become medically impaired because of illness or sometimes because of a trauma. And as a result of that, psychologically, they tend to get certain types of illnesses because they've been off work for a significant period of time, or because they just become what we used to say, they become their illness or they become their condition. They can't see past their current existence and their present situation. So, what I used to do as a coach in that environment is I used to work with people who were impaired medically for whatever reason to get them to understand that their situation is just their present and doesn't have to be their future, and to get them envision what their best life could be like regardless of whether they still have their current medical condition or not. So it was really about getting them to understand their present and getting them to project into their future, but also losing some of the barriers that get created when you're in a position where you feel like you have no hope. So it was really to get these people to draw into themselves and understand that just because they have a medical condition, it doesn't mean that everything else they had as part of themselves has all of a sudden disappeared. They don't become their illness. We don't allow them to become their disability. And once they can see past that, which it can often take a lot of work, what it allows them to realize is that, well, this is just a small piece of who I am. This is a physical impairment, or this is an emotional impairment. And it means that every other aspect of my life can still chug along, maybe differently, but it can still happen. And I've been fortunate enough over the years, and it was about 15 years all up that I was working in life insurance for, that we had many epiphanies. And to be able to work with someone who comes to you initially as helpless and hopeless, and this is going to be the rest of my life, to be able to have that position where they just realize that, well, hang on, my life has changed, but it's actually not over. It's not defined by this event that has happened to me. Life is actually happening for me. And to get them to that perspective where they start to take control of things and start to generate motivation and have that desire to be better, that's really where coaching started to have a profound effect on what I realized I could give people, and how through conversations, people all have the ability to be more and do more. It's really just about their motivation and what they have as their own identity of who they are at that period of time.
mhm. So can I ask you this? There's a couple questions I have within there. So in order for people to make a change, right? Because you're saying you're helping them brainstorm from no hope to how to be hopeful. Do they have to have that identity shift first, or can they start to take some steps and then their identity takes, change over time?
I think it's fair to say that growth is continuous and there's no set way to go about doing it for any one person. Inherently, as people, we all function the same, but the way we perceive things is vastly different. It's all based on our experiences and based on the people we associate with, based on things that we allow into our lives and the things that we ring fence and keep out of our lives. So whilst we're inherently the same, we're also vastly different. So people can go through significant change without really tapping into what they consider to be their identity because they've ring fenced that off. They can still perform. But when we're talking about someone who's able to truly master their potential and harness themselves to be the absolute best that they can be, you have to be in flow with yourself. And in order to be in flow, you cannot have any element of conflict. So typically people who avoid having conflict will be the ones that will be willing to go in deep and understand who they are, what they represent, but they'll also understand the why. Why do I represent this? Why is this important to me? Why do I make these choices? And people who continue to grow will constantly go through a period of reflection where we will have a look at the things that we've allowed into our lives and we'll decide whether or not we want to keep them. Some beliefs sneak in, some perspectives sneak in when you're not looking, and you'll have that little inner monologue that will quite often tell you things you don't want to hear. Sometimes we'll let that in because our guards are down or we're not on point. Other times we'll just go, oh, that's ridiculous. I don't believe that. But it's always there. And we need to be mindful of the fact that whether you are a high performer who is completely on your game or you're a person who's just starting out, we all have that inner conflict. It's what we do with it that matters. And that's where your identity and your performance comes in, to be able to have the tools in play to know that this is just a voice in my head. This is not actually who I am or what I am unless I allow that to happen that way. And I have the power to change it.
Mm. What is a high performer to you?
To me, a high performer is a person who has intention, who knows what they're doing with their life, who is willing to commit to mastery by being disciplined. They often have plans in play of what they want to achieve. They can tell you off the bat why they're here and what they're going to do with their time. They are inherent service-oriented people who are willing to give before they receive. And they're always ready to take on something more.
Can I ask this question? So, is potential a journey or is it a destination? Like, can you reach your full potential in moment to moment?
It's funny you should say that. I was actually doing a coaching session with my coach this morning, and we were talking about the difference between psychology and sociology and how they are so inherently entwined. But psychology has shifted so much over what, for instance, my parents' generation would have believed. So as an example, my parents had the belief back in the baby boomer generation that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. That very young in your age, you are defined by the experiences that you have at that period of time, and that's just who you're going to be for the rest of your life. Thankfully, we've learned since then, and we understand neuroplasticity. We understand the fact that the brain can learn and change and develop, but it's all generated by our willingness to do that. So potential, I don't believe it's ever truly reached. The people who are looking to master their potential recognize that and are constantly looking for more, to gain more, to be more, to give more.
So how do you determine someone's potential? How do you determine potential for yourself?
For me, my potential would be about what I have to give today based on what I know. But I think one of the key things to realize about potential is how you perceive your own potential is quite often vastly different to how other people perceive us. So no doubt you've had it yourself, where someone will say something to you, you'll hear them say, "You're so good at such and such," and you might say, "Oh no, I'm not good at that at all." And by the smile on your face, I can tell that you've experienced that. That's the difference between how you view your potential versus how they view your potential. And quite often there's a gap between the two. But there's an opportunity there for you to explore how that other people sees you through their eyes. And perhaps there's a gap there that's worthwhile filling.
Is it better for the gap to be where where people see you have a higher potential than what you see for yourself? Or is it better for you to see a very high potential for yourself more than other people see for you?
Oh, it sounds like what we're talking about now is drive. So I put my potential at a very high level purely because I want to continue to drive to do better, to be better. Someone may consider you to have a higher potential than you view of yourself. And I really wouldn't say whether one's better than the other, because at the end of the day, if you surround yourself with people who think you're capable of doing more than you're already doing, automatically you're going to lift. You're going to have a desire to lift to what those people see in you. And I personally have quite a few people that I surround myself with who have assisted me immensely on my journey to be able to continue being motivated.
So earlier you said something about like flow.
Yeah.
Can you talk about what is flow first?
Okay. So flow for me is when everything aligns. So it's about where your energy hits its ultimate creative space and you find something where you are able to get the information out easily, or it's a period of time. For instance, you'll know you're in flow when you're sitting and doing something and hours pass by and you don't realize. That's flow.
Mm. So is flow something that you can turn on and off as you train more, or is it more of you have to relax until it just occurs?
I think flow can be mastered. You look at some of the Buddhist behaviors in relation to meditation and some of the things that they're able to achieve as a result of just doing things differently and tapping internally. I do believe that there is opportunity for us to be more aware of ourselves and generate more flow. Absolutely.
Just for the people watching, like I'm taking, it's my second page of notes and I'm just looking all over the place. This is really interesting. So things inevitably are going to go wrong, right? So in your business, maybe a client cancels last minute. Maybe there's so million different things that can happen, right? Your account gets hacked like mine did today. How do you gauge whether or not you're in flow when you're in a chaotic world?
Flow has a very, very different feel. So you'll know when you're in flow because your body will become very relaxed. Everything becomes very easy in relation to the task that you're doing at that particular point in time or the situation you find yourself in. But I think, Bryce, you've tapped into something really important there about our perspective in relation to how our lives should play out. We should always be mindful of the fact that even if we are mastering our potential, even if we are utilizing flow, meditating, doing all the right things, stuff's going to go wrong. And if you have an expectation that it's not going to go wrong, then you need to go back and have a look at that, because everybody has something that goes wrong. It happens all the time. It's a part of life. But our resilience to be able to manage things when they go wrong helps to determine how quickly we get back into motivated state.
So how much is too much when you're expecting things to go wrong?
I think you're talking now about the difference between do I have an understanding of stuff goes wrong versus do I sit there and stress about it? So I personally don't stress about anything. I am aware of the fact that the world turns, and though I am a part of the world, I am not the world. If I was, nothing would ever go wrong. So because I understand the fact that things go wrong that are completely outside of my control, then it's about how I respond to them when they do.
Mm. Okay. So the next question is, you don't stress about anything. So is that just like present you don't stress, or even when things occur, do you have moments where you're like, oh crap, and you have to kind of get back into that motivation state, or have you trained yourself to where?
I think it's fair to say I had a situation recently where I was surrounded by people that I haven't been around for a little while, and I fell back into old behaviors. And because these are quite stressful people and they create quite stressful environments, I slipped back into what I was all that time ago. So I think it's mindful to be aware of the fact that we have old behaviors which will rear their heads from time to time. But stress is more about how we react to situations. So from my perspective, I am aware of the things in my life which create problems. which create possible stressors. So as a result of that, I need to be mindful of how I deal with those people, and I need to be mindful of how much time I spend with those people. I also need to be aware of when people call me at certain hours of the day or night based on their previous behaviors. This usually means it's going to be a certain type of call. So therefore, do I take that call knowing that it's likely to be a stressful call and prepare myself for it? Or do I say, well, actually, this is going to be a stressful call based on the previous behaviors of this person, so I'm going to choose to opt out this time?
Interesting. That's pretty cool. So you're controlling. Is stress the same as fear?
No. We all have fear, and fear has a very real place in our lives. It's hormonal response to keep us safe. I think what we have allowed ourselves to do with our fears is we allow ourselves to create our identity and become who we are, as opposed to utilizing fear for what it's for. It's a response to keep us safe, but instead of utilizing it for that, we allow it to create a sense of isolation, because all of a sudden we're fearful of things that we can't explain. And we don't know why, they're just scary. And quite often I have with my clients where we're dealing with fears, and I'll ask them if it does come up, and I'll say, well, it sounds like you're fearful of that. Can you explain it to me a little bit more? And when we get into the depth of the fear, I'll say, well, why do you have that fear? And quite often people will say, I actually don't know. And if I ask them, well, how long have you had that fear? I get the same answer. Oh, I don't know. It's like, well, how do you feel about that now that you know that you have it, and you don't know how long you've had it, but it obviously has this effect on you. How do you feel about it? And again, the response is, I'm not sure. I've just always had it. I don't know what to do with it. So fear can be utilized to control us if we allow it to.
Mm-hmm. So I guess what I was, the next kind of thing down was connecting those two of fear and stress. Does not addressing something you're afraid of cause that time frame cause you to feel stressed out?
Absolutely. Yes. Quite frequently, what we'll do is we'll create ourselves a situation where we get stressed about something because we're fearful. One of the biggest things that my clients are fearful of is the unknown. They go into what I call speculation, and they'll speculate, but what if this, but what if that? And they automatically go towards the negative speculation because it's a fear. So I try and get my clients to talk about the fear, and while they'll go into the state of speculating about the negative, I'll also go, but what could be the possible positives of that same fear? What if it happened differently? What could that look like? And try and create for them a sense of, well, you have this fear, but in actual fact, it could go either way. There could be a positive or a negative from it. So what's stopping you from stepping forward to see what the outcome is? But inevitably, if we allow our fears to continue on, say, for instance, one of the biggest things I see with business people is procrastination. And I'll ask them, well, why haven't you done this thing yet that you know is so important? And quite often it will be, well, I'm really not sure I know how to do it properly, or I'm not sure I'm going to do it to the standard, so I'm just not going to do it. So these people are allowing their fear to overtake them. And as a result of that, what's happening is they're creating a more deep hole for themselves, because now it's not just the fear of doing it right, it's now the consequences of not doing it at all. And then that creates for them a certain amount of stress as a result of that. And then that turns into anxiety, because anxiety is about how we perceive the future. And the cycle can continue if we really don't get hold of fear and understand what it's actually meant for.
Wow, that's a very, very downward spiral.
Very easy. Yes, I've seen quite a few people that I know that have hit that downward spiral, and it's a very quick descent if you don't get a hold of it.
There's two questions I want to ask as a result of that. So procrastination, right? So there is a moderate amount of, logic in procrastination, at least on the surface, right? I don't want it to be terrible. How bad is the opposite spectrum, where they're willing to move fast, make mistakes, and then kind of learn from that? Can that be a bad thing as well?
I think that that's relative to environment. If you're in an environment such as a corporate environment, for instance, where you have an innovative team that says, you know what, we're just going to go out and we're going to try it and we're going to learn from it, then that is absolutely acceptable and go for it under all circumstances. Likewise, if you're running your own business, you don't answer to anybody but yourself. So you can go and take those risks and deal with any potential consequences from that, because the ownership sits with the owner of the business, i.e. me. So that's very different in my perspective because I work for myself. However, if you work for someone else, you need to be mindful of what that business is trying to achieve and what culture that business has. If you're a bit of a rogue and you want to go out and be an innovator and you want to take risks, that's fantastic. If you're in the right environment for that, then that will be acceptable and considered to be high performance. But if you're the type of person that's willing to be an innovator and take risks, that you're in an environment that's a very safe, secure, we do what we've always done type of environment, then you'll ultimately be perceived as a low performer or possibly even a troublemaker. So it's all relative to the environment that you're in. My recommendation would be, if you want to be a person that's an innovator, that wants to take risks, that wants to do things, then find an environment that suits the type of person that you are. And I'd actually say that for anybody, because the benefit in finding the environment that's congruent to who you are is inevitably you will perform. Because you're around people who are like-minded, who are cheering you on, who have the same mindset.
So we kind of talked about, the future, right? So I feel like a lot of people, or even myself, right, it's not really anxiety, but it's like we don't know what our potential is, right? So we don't know if we're actually moving forward or going to reach our overall goals for the future, and that causes anxiety. How do you help people break out of that?
That's a really good question, and I deal with that a lot. I used to be that person. I used to be that person that was told for years, and I lost count how many times I heard, you've got so much potential, Joe. You've got so much leadership qualities. You've got so much to share. You've got so much to say. And I'd be the one that would sit there and go, okay, thanks. That's great. I had no idea what to do with it. And I got in a situation where the more people were trying to be supportive of me by making those amazing statements, the more I felt like I was a failure and I wasn't doing what I should be doing. I felt like I was letting people down. For me, in my situation, I wasn't doing it because I just didn't know how. I didn't know who to turn to. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have any time. I'm a parent. I was married. I had bills to pay, social engagements to keep, family to keep happy, children to look after. I was at the point I was barely even looking after myself. So when people come up and say you've got amazing potential to share and do all these things, I just go, great, thanks. I didn't know what to do with it. But I think the key is, and in fact I know the key is, it's in planning. It's in self-belief. It's in being willing to take the step. It's having a tribe of people around you. I have a saying that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're officially in the wrong room. Find another one. Because you want to be around people who are leaders, who you look up to, who can teach you something. And then in turn, what you then do is you share it with the people around you. But the key, and for anything big, when you're talking about, for instance, a goal for work, a goal for family, I find a lot of people don't actually know how to set goals. They're told they should have a goal, but they have no idea where to start. They don't know how to implement one, or they write these amazing, huge goals like New Year's resolutions that are never achieved because there's no planning behind it. A goal is just words without a plan. It's just a dream. So if you're looking to achieve something, you need to put the plan in play on how you're going to achieve it. If I want to get to the moon, it's awesome. When are you going to get to the moon, Joe? How are you going to get to the moon, Joe? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to help you? Who's got the expertise? What's your plan? Because without a plan, it's just a dream.
So follow up to that. So how can they make a plan if they have no idea, the steps that it takes to do that?
Well, that's where people like me come in. We show people how to plan. I help you learn how to write goals. One of the first things I'll say to people when you are looking at writing a goal is, what's your why? What's your motivation? And you need to know what your motivation is. If you don't understand what your motivation is, then if something goes wrong in the planning phase towards your goal, then you run the risk of losing your motivation. You've got to always be able to come back to that inherent why. Why am I doing this? What am I trying to achieve? And if you don't have those two things as your fundamental building blocks, you run the risk of everything else falling over. It's like building on sinking sand. So you have to have a really solid why.
Interesting. That's a good point. I just thought of stuff made me flash to one of my clients that I reviewed that with her.
Now I'm assuming, Bryce, that you know your why.
I have a couple different whys, but it depends on which conversation and who we're talking to. What is your why?
Oh, really good question. My why also differs slightly depending on what I'm talking about. So if you were to ask me why I've gone into high performance coaching and moved out of the coaching I was doing, the answer to that is simple. I realized whilst I was doing the coaching that I was doing that I had more to offer, and I started to understand all those people for all those years telling me that I had potential. I had a lot of aha moments over a period of a couple of years where it allowed me to get into a position where I realized that I actually did have something that was valuable that I could share with other people. And because of all the learning I'd done, I had something that was definitely worthwhile going out and giving.
Can I ask you this question? I think we moved a little too fast from it, right? We're talking about how when the outside world's perception of your potential is different from where you believe that you are, and it was kind of leading to like those negative emotions. How do you move past that feeling?
The feeling of you're not achieving your potential?
Well, how you're saying all these people would come to you and say, you could be achieving much more, you could be giving and sharing much more, but you know that you're trying as hard as you can, it's leading to anxiety and stress and those bad emotions. How do you move past that?
The fundamental thing is to understand where those people are coming from. So for instance, you might have a parent that is saying to you, you should be a doctor. You've got all the qualities, you should be a doctor, you'd be amazing at it. It's really disappointing you never chose to go into medicine. You should have been a doctor. Understanding where that person is coming from will help you to realize what they're actually saying. So for instance, in my case, when I used to have that said to me, it took me a long time to realize that in actual fact, the person that was saying that to me had regret that they'd never had the opportunity to do medicine. And they saw in me the same traits that they had. So they didn't want me to make the mistake that they had made. So they were basically telling me that I should do what they didn't do because they didn't live their life the right way, because our traits were the same. So once I understood where that person was coming from, it enabled me to understand that what they were actually saying to me is, I'm perceived as a pretty smart person, and you are someone that's very close to me, and I perceive you to be the same. Therefore, I want you to utilize everything you've got, and this is the best way I know how. So understanding where they're coming from, when they're giving you compliments, which may or may not cause you stress based on where you're at that period of time, is really, really key to being able to know what to do with that.
So can I ask you this? So kind of stepping that, right? If you're doing everything that you know to do, but you're not hitting your goals, are you reaching your potential? Basically, the question is potential based on intent, effort, or result, or what is it based on?
I think potential is based on what you're willing to put in and get out. So your potential is, how hard are you willing to work to achieve what you want to achieve? Your potential is defined by others differently to how you'll define it yourself. And I think it's important to note that how you perceive yourself will always be slightly different to how other people perceive you. That's just human nature, and we should never expect that to align, because that's unreasonable. But potential is continuous. It's My potential today might be, for instance, let's say I'm immensely sick. And okay, the potential that I have today is purely just about getting out of bed and doing the basics to keep my world turning, but my focus is going to be on getting well. My potential when I'm at my peak is to get out of bed at 4:30 in the morning, to do my meditation, to do my study, to do my work, to do my exercise, to look after my family. And then I utilize my day. And when I reflect in the evening, when I journal, I say, did I reach my potential today? And it's, well, you know what? I did everything that I said I was going to do. I actually pushed further than that today. I challenged myself today. I did something new, or I did something hard, or I overcame a fear. So when you're looking at potential in, say, a 24-hour period, it's a lot easier to measure. And for that reason, I will identify my plan for the day in the morning when I get up, and I'll reflect in the evenings on how I went.
That is interesting. Okay, so when you're so how the example you gave, right, was based on things that you could control. So is it dangerous to base potential on hitting goals that include things that you cannot control?
No, I don't think so, because your potential does take into consideration other people all the time. For instance, I might have something that I need to achieve in a set day. Well, I have things I rely on in order to be able to achieve that, be it people, places, or tools. Okay. So if you're unable to hit your goal for the day or achieve your absolute best for that day because of things outside of your control, then it's outside your control. Then it becomes about, well, how did I react to that? Did I react the best way I possibly could have?
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Cool thought. Yeah. So, who do you work with?
I work typically with corporate people and people who own their own business, both men and women of any age group.
Do they have to be at a certain, I don't want to say success level, but at a certain level already? Or is it anybody who's willing to change?
Anybody who's willing to change. And that's the key. That is the absolute key. Before you get a coach, you need to be willing to make the change. You need to be motivated to do something different. And you need to be open to be challenged, because the people who benefit from having coaches are the ones that go in and are completely willing to play full out and go, let's just do this.
So what about people? So like, how do you handle people that initially were very motivated to change, but during the journey they start get demotivated or they get scared? How do you deal with that?
It can happen, and it creeps in sometimes, because the coaching that I do is also about the physical responses to the situations that we're talking about. So, for instance, a client might be talking to me about something, and then after they've had the conversation with me, I'll say to them, I want you to check in with your body right now. How are you breathing? How are you sitting? How do you feel? What words are you using? And they'll reflect back to me, and I'll say, well, what does that all mean? And they'll wind it up and say, I don't like this, or it scares me, or I'm bothered by this, or I don't have an answer for that. So the way I coach people is, as soon as I start noticing that little things are starting to become demotivated or they're starting to struggle, we step onto that very quickly, and I ask for permission to step away from the conversation we're having at the time by saying things like, I can see that there's a little bit of a conflict here. Can we discuss what that is? And more often than not, people are unaware of their conflict until you actually point it out. But as soon as they become aware of it, they can talk about it. Sometimes it's, I actually don't want to go there, I'm not ready to. And then we'll talk about, well, whilst you continue to let this thing stay in your life and let this thing sit here as, for instance, a fear, the impact on you is going to be this. This is how it's going to feel. This is how it's going to look. And the words that you've just told me are going to be how it impacts you and the people around you. Are you okay with that? To have this still stay in your life? Some people will say yes because they're not ready to deal with it. And what I'll get them to do is I'll get them to visualize what this fear looks like. And I'll say, I want you to give the fear a picture in your mind. And most often they'll give it a really scary picture, which is perfect. And I'll say, so whenever you get this fear, this picture is going to come in your mind. And I want that to remind you that you need to deal with this. But in the meantime, I want you to put it up on the shelf. And I'll get them to get this little picture in their hands and visually put it up on the shelf. And I say, this shelf is something that you need to come back to. Sometimes people have inherent fears which are quite significant, in which case that's not something a coach should be dealing with. They should be getting professional treatment. And if there's a fear as a result of an event or something like that, quite often we'll refer them to professional treaters. So when I was working in life insurance, we were working in conjunction with psychologists and psychiatrists. So whilst I was coaching this on the sidelines with regards to mindfulness and projection for the future, they'd be working with their psychiatrist or their psychologist to deal with the actual trauma that they were going through or the mental illness that they had. So in some cases, it's literally the best thing for a coach to do is to remind their client that it seems like you've got other things that you need to deal with that doesn't fit into what a coach would do for you. Perhaps it's worthwhile doing something about that.
Okay. That's pretty cool. Wait, so then do you, well, that's an okay question. So when do you let clients go?
I've never had to let a client go.
Mm.
I have been in a position where a client wasn't engaged because of things that they had going on. And we came to an agreement that the best thing for them to do would be to take a small hiatus so they could deal with the other things that were causing distractions in their life so they could come back fully focused to what they were trying to achieve. And they did that. They went and they took the nominated period and they came back. They dealt with what they needed to deal with. They set a goal with me before they left. And they said, right, we'll set the new appointment. We'll meet again at this date, at this time, at this place. And between now and then, I am going to have achieved this. Mm. So then I checked in with them during the period that they were on hiatus for. Just did a quick check in. How are you going? Is everything going according to plan? Are you doing well? And then confirmed the meeting a couple of days beforehand. And my clients actually fill in a form prior to any coaching session. And the form talks about what we agreed to in the last session that was going to be the achievements, how they've gone on those actions or goals, what they have had success with, anything that they found to be a distraction, and what they'd like to talk about in the next session. So that sets up what we will discuss in the session.
But during that hiatus, do they lose a little bit of momentum? You kind of have to backtrack a little bit to get going forward, or you just pick back up and say, hey, you've been out for a year. You remember all this stuff from before? I've
never had a hiatus that long. It's only ever been a month. I recommend to people if they go away and they need to come back, that it's always with a purpose. It's never, I just need to take a break. You always put parameters around what that break is set to achieve. Because if you don't put a parameter around that, it becomes indefinite and you can lose momentum and you lose drive, and it can literally unravel everything that's been worked on, especially if these people are in a situation where they're around negative people or they fall back into old habits, which is always a huge, huge risk. Mm-hmm.
How do you help people handle burnout? Do you believe it exists?
I've been there. One of the parts of my story is a couple of years ago, a few years ago, I became a single parent. And so for 2 years, I worked myself to the ground. I had 2 jobs. I was running my children everywhere. They were quite small. And I was doing absolutely everything I can to make ends meet. I didn't even know that I was sick. I'd just been on holidays and it was just locally interstate. And I remember coming back on the plane. As soon as I stepped onto that plane, I didn't feel well. and I didn't know why. And so for the next 3 days, I had a chronic migraine and all sorts of other symptoms. Now, I don't generally get sick, so I just thought if I go to the doctors and they give me something for the migraine, then in 2 days' time, I can go back to my full-time job like I'm supposed to. It turns out I was quite sick. Within 24 hours, I found myself in an ambulance being transferred to a high dependency unit in isolation. It turned out that I had depleted my immune system so badly that I had the chief oncologist and the chief hematologist asking me questions like, do you have HIV? Have you had chemotherapy recently? Have you been treated for cancer? And as a person who's worked with doctors for quite some time, I know we're talking about blood-related conditions and major illnesses there, which suggests that something's significantly depleted, but I didn't know what. And when they're transferring me to the isolation unit, I'm being wheeled in with people with gloves and masks and gowns, and it was all very weird because I kept saying to the doctor, I've just got a migraine and body aches. It's probably just the flu. Just give me what I need so I can go back to work in a couple of days. I promise I'll go home and rest. And the hematologist actually said, oh, you're not going for at least a week. You're here. So for the next 4 days, they did every test known to man. I can tell people lumbar punctures are not as bad as you think they are. I've had a couple now. And they found out that I had a virus. Just a random virus. But the risk for me was my immune system was so badly depleted that if I'd come in contact with someone with the common cold, I could have died because I wouldn't have been able to fight it. So burnout does exist. I truly believe it because I've experienced it. But the big lesson for me in that situation was I was totally unaware of it. And I'm a person who's tuned into their body. I thought I was just tired.
So let me ask you this. So then how does one, is like you have to crash and then you can take steps, or what are some steps that you take to kind of avoid that nowadays?
Please don't crash. Crashing is not good. We know when we are heading towards burnout. Our body tells us. As people, we ignore it because we think we're okay, because we convince ourselves that we have to keep going doing what we're doing. There are so many keys to avoiding burnout. The things that I do, for instance, I look after my physical health. I eat well. I consume a lot of water. I make sure that I have the right amount of sleep. Now, sleep is critical, but typically for people that consider themselves high performers, that's the first thing that goes out the window. Well, if you're not sleeping enough, you can't possibly focus. You cannot possibly have the clarity that you need, and you are losing the ability to make decisions that you need to be able to make. That's just a byproduct of a lack of sleep for anybody. Your energy needs to be taken care of in relation to your physical energy, your spiritual energy, your emotional energy. So physical energy is exercise and food and water and sleep. We're talking about spiritual energy, then it's meditation, it's prayer, it's spending time connecting with someone or something bigger than you. As a Christian, I pray. So for me, I meditate and I pray and I read the Bible. That's for me, that's my spiritual energy. And then on top of that, you've got your emotions, managing and controlling your emotions. All of these things play a part to avoiding burnout. Your body will give you physical signs. Your mind will give you physical signs. You'll start forgetting things. You might forget to leave the desk to go to the bathroom, and all of a sudden it's, oh my goodness, I have to go now. You might stop drinking water, taking lunch. All these things are telling you that you need to start looking after your body, but we ignore them because we think our jobs are more important. We think that something's going to fall over if we go and take a half-hour run or walk away from our desk. I've proved it to myself time and time again. I'm actually better off walking away from my desk for half an hour, going and having lunch with a friend and coming back refreshed than I was by staying at my desk, because the interaction that I get socially with that individual, the stimulation that my mind gets from walking and by changing my environment away from my computer is all way more valuable than me continuing to sit in front of a PC or a laptop for a half an hour and skipping lunch.
Can disappointments, continuous disappointments, lead to burnout as well? Or is it only like working?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that continuous disappointments can lead to a lack of motivation. It can definitely affect your self-belief. But burnout, I don't think on its own that can lead to burnout, no.
So what is the definition of burnout to you?
Burnout to me is in a hospital bed with IVs hanging out of you with the chief oncologist saying if someone sneezes on you, you're going to die.
Now, that's an extreme level, right? But are like at a minor level, right?
Minor levels. So some of the classic symptoms of burnout are you're impatient. Just snappy impatient. Well, if you're naturally impatient, then more impatient than you normally are. For instance, as a parent with children, you might be a very loving, kind, generous parent, then all of a sudden you've just got no patience, and you might be that parent that never yells, and all of a sudden you find yourself raising your voice or yelling. You'll know straight away. Your inner monologue will tell you straight away, you shouldn't have done that. That's a sign we should listen, because we are constantly telling ourselves and giving ourselves guidelines and warnings that we are hitting burnout. I don't want to go and exercise, for instance. So I know exercise is good for me. I know exercise helps to generate energy. So it could be burnout, could just be lack of motivation. Burnout literally means that you've come to the point where you have nothing left to offer. And it's different for everybody because it's all about what you tolerate.
Okay, cool. So, do you have any special projects going on or anything new that you have coming out to the public?
I have a couple of big plans for 2020, and not the least of which is going in and becoming certified as a Brendan Burchard high performance coach. So that's one of my big ticket things for me personally for 2020. I'm working on a program whereby I'll be able to help people to be able to learn how to do what I do in a very easy way. One of the key things I want people to realize in 2020, and that I'm going to be assisting people to realize, is that high performance is not just for the 1%ers, even though we think it is. The difference between a high performer and a person who isn't a high performer is just a series of choices that anybody can make. And I'll be promoting some things throughout the course of the year in relation to that.
Where can people find more about you?
There's two ways that you can connect with me. The primary way to get posts is through Facebook. So you can find me under Jo Jackson. I am also on LinkedIn.
Can you say that last thing again? High performance is a series of blank. What'd you say?
High performance is a series of choices.
Cool. Well, thanks so much for doing this interview with me. I really appreciate your time and learning more about you and, your experience.
Thanks so much, Bryce. I appreciate your time.
Yeah. That was interesting. The first time we met was she said, "Thank you for joining my tribe." And I didn't really understand exactly what she meant when she said that. But, I'm glad that I thought what it meant was I joined a Facebook group of hers. And I was like, oh, I don't know. But yeah, thanks so much. I'm glad that I decided to, reach out and ask to do this. For those of you watching, thank you so much for, making it to this point in the video. As a way to say thank you, I would love to offer you access to my group called Uncapped Growth Strategies. As the name suggests, we give you everything that you need to move forward in your business and your life towards, what I believe you're searching for. If that's something you've been looking for, but, you just haven't been able to get there, I recommend you go join that group. We're going to have interviews just like this one today with experts who know exactly what they're talking about and maybe are in a position in their business where you'd like to be one day. If that's what you're looking for, I recommend you go check out the link in the description below. Thanks so much again, Joe. I really appreciate your time. Have a great day, guys. See you later.